Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... This weekend, I'm knocking out two birds with one stone. For starters, I'm reviewing Slade House by David Mitchell, which had been recommended to me by the fabulous Lisa G. And even though I had intended to read and review this over the summer, fate caused a delay, which, to my surprise, I discovered upon reading this that even though the book doesn't focus on Halloween, the horrors of Slade House take place on October 27th. So I figured this would be a great opportunity for me to go on and review this book and ease us into my yearly Halloween book reviews. Also, even though Lisa G had already read this classic, she decided to revisit it with a group of newbies, which not only included myself, but it included my good online friends Hanny and John. And as always, I absolutely loved our buddy read because we had so many great discussions.
So, you know how Connie and I have been dabbling in witchcraft?
Yeah, but... Y'all, this is a bad time. I'm in the middle of a book review.
Well, we made a lovely little potion for you to drink.
It's guaranteed that if you drink it, your hair will grow.
Well... This can't be any worse than the pumpkin spice lattes you made me.
Oh, a lovely potion.
This'll teach that little turd.
Vagina of squirrel.
Nipples of dogs.
Testicles of bat.
And a penis of frog. What will we tell him to make him drink it?
Leave that to me, Picky.
I can't wait for him to drink it.
He's gonna get what he deserves.
He deserves it. He has pulled one too many pranks. He is finally
Karma's
gonna get
coming,
his.
bitch.
Karma!
Ugh. Ugh. Well, that was an experience. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Connie.
Our pleasure.
What the hell did y'all put in that? So, I would like to thank Lisa for recommending this awesome book, and I would like to thank her as well as Hanny and John for buddy reading this with me. And if any of you are watching, I hope you enjoy this review. But without further ado, since the weather is getting cooler, let's go enjoy a pint at the Fox and Hound pub, then visit Nora and Jonah at their mansion. So, I do not know how this happened, but the stars aligned to my favor, and I received a signed hardback of Slade House by David Mitchell. Now, if you open this up, you see the layout of Slade House and all of that good stuff. But the page behind it, lo and behold, David Mitchell's signature. So, yeah, this is something I'm going to forever cherish. And I wasn't even trying to get a signed edition of this book. I had just ordered off for a copy, and this is what I received. So, yeah, for a change, I totally lucked out. With bragging aside, Slade House by David Mitchell is a ghost story that takes place from 1979 to 2015. And throughout these decades, we follow a timeline where every 9 years, an engifted person who is either a psychic or someone who has a psychic ability is drawn to visit Slade House, which is hidden away behind a mysterious alley door. And for those who are brave enough to venture beyond this doorway, they encounter a property that is too large to fit in this area of the village. Also, they eventually meet a set of twins named Nora and Jonah, who, by using the dark arts, have discovered a way to live forever. Yet, while the siblings have survived the decades by feeding human souls to what is known as an operandi, they eventually meet an Engifted who is a fighter. Slade House by David Mitchell was released in 2015, where it was met with mixed reviews. Also, it is a companion to Mitchell's novel The Bone Clocks, which was released in 2014. Slade House came into existence due to Mitchell having a Twitter account that his publisher only used to post about his book signings. While Mitchell didn't tweet at the time, he created a personal account and decided to share a series of tweets that later became Slade House. Throughout 280 tweets, he wrote the tale called The Right Sort, which eventually served as the novel's first chapter. Throughout Slade House, there are references to Mitchell's other works. Some of these include when Miss Bishop is speaking to Detective Edwins, and she mentions a dream of being carried to Zedligen, which this location is a reference to Mitchell's novel Cloud Atlas. Later, a character mentions his mother transcribed the Crispin Hershey novel Desiccated Embryos into Braille, which Hershey is a character in The Bone Clocks. Also, it notes the character of Sally has a sister who works for Spyglass magazine, which that magazine is mentioned in The Bone Clocks and Cloud Atlas. Fun facts! Here's a few things you might not know about David Mitchell. David Mitchell graduated from the University of Kent with a degree in English and American literature, as well as a Master's of Arts in Comparative Literature. After living a year in Italy, he taught English for 8 years in Japan before returning to England. Throughout his writing career, he has been listed twice for the Man Booker Prize, he was shortlisted for the Guardian First Book Award, and he won the John Llewellyn Rhys Prize. In 2007, Mitchell had been named one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine. Aside from writing, he praised the movie The King's Speech for accurately portraying what it's like to stammer. Being a stammerer himself, he is a patron of the British Stammering Association, which the mission of this charity is to support anyone who has a stammer. As an inspiration, he encourages those who stammer to not be afraid to face the challenge and to seek help. Now that we have that covered, it's time to move on to the spoilers section, which, if you haven't read this book before, I'm about to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you. So if you would like to skip this segment, all you have to do is scroll down to the comments, and you'll see that I have a pinned comment at the top that will direct you away from the spoilers and bring you to the thoughts section. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this, so ready, set, go! Since everyone's had the opportunity to click away, I would like to talk about a few of my favorite moments. First up is the party scene in the segment called Oink Oink. Now, this introduces the character named Axel, who has elaborated to his paranormal group about Slade House. And in his telling, he's explained that his Uncle Fred told him that people have disappeared at Slade House the last weekend in October, which this is because every 9 years the house blinks into existence during this weekend. Well, during Axel briefing the group, it's explained that since this is the last weekend in October, they are going to use this evening to investigate, which, after exploring Slade Alley, they finally come to the infamous iron door that chooses who will enter and who won't. Then, after one of the group members by the name of Sally is able to open the door, they step into a scene where a huge Halloween party is going on, which, even though they feel like they were sent on a wild goose chase because it had been rumored that Slade House vanished after the disappearances, they decide to join the party. However, once Sally gets banjaxed, she starts to go through these trippy scenes where the house starts to morph, the television reports her disappearance, and Axel has merged into another body with one of the group members. Then, once it's too late, Sally comes to the realization that this has all been one great delusion created by the twins so they can harvest her soul. Personally, I vibed with this entire chapter because it took place in the 90s. And since I grew up during that time, this was nothing but nostalgic love for me. But more important than that, this author is able to take his readers and place them in the middle of the scenes that he creates. Like multiple times throughout this book, I felt like I had actually gone to the Fox and Hound pub, I felt like I had braved Slade House, and I felt like I had wandered around this old creepy English village. So when the party sequence came up, I was so very thrilled to feel like I was actually at that 90s Halloween party. And the great thing about it was, I could enjoy that aesthetic safely from the comforts of my recliner, because when I saw this party going on, I'm like, yeah, this is a trap. It's gonna go bad. Also, I thought it was really cool how the author name-dropped the song Novocaine for the Soul by the Eels, because not only does that song kick ass, it really truly fit what was going on with this story in regards to the human soul. And after that name drop happened, I turned on my Spotify and listened to that song on repeat for about a good half hour, because, yeah, nostalgia. And I really did appreciate when we saw Axel and Angela form into one human body in this horrible meltdown thing, which, even though I had seen something like this before in the movie Society, I did not expect to see that in this book. And when it happened, I was just as surprised and horrified as Sally. So, major kudos to the author for throwing in the body horror card and catching me off my guard. My next favorite moment is the backstory on the twins. Now, at this point, it's 2006, and Freya, who had been Sally's sister, becomes the main focus. Which, because of Sally having disappeared in the 90s, Fred reaches out to Freya by email and expresses he can explain to her what happened to Sally by providing a backstory. However, once Freya meets with Fred, she discovers that Fred is actually Jonah in disguise, and she's been set up. Nonetheless, as he's drawing her into the lacuna, he explains everything began over a century ago when the twins were born in a gatekeeper's cottage on the property of the Pitts family. But after the parents of the twins died, the Pitts family brought the twins into their home and treated them like they were their own. Over time, it was discovered that the twins shared a telepathy. And once their guardians learned of this, Miss Pitt wrote a book about them, which, unfortunately, this work gained the attention of Dr. Cantillon, who had met with spiritualists and shamans. And once he weaseled his way into their family, he manipulated them and became guardian of the twins. From here, it's detailed on how he educated them in the ways of the occult, and after he had them meet a Saeed, the twins had learned all there was to know about magic, the spirit, and mind control. Then, in the 1920s, against the wishes of the twins, Dr. Cantillon became their biographer so he could prove that science and spiritualism could coexist. However, after he wrote his manifesto and published it, he mysteriously killed himself. And even though there was no proof, there had been a great suspicion that the twins had persuaded him to commit suicide. From there, the twins ended up buying Slade House, where they used the locals as their guinea pigs. I am a sucker for a good, creepy backstory, and this one does not disappoint, especially since it presented something that I had never seen done before. Also, up until this point, there were a few things that I was confused about, but after receiving the explanation, I felt like I had a firmer grasp of everything, and it left me feeling completely satisfied, and surprisingly, it actually humanized the antagonist. So even though, of course, I was rooting for the antagonist to get their comeuppance, it did give them a level where I did feel sorry for them to a degree, or at least I felt sorry for them in their childhood. By the way, I would like to take this opportunity to gush about how much I love the creativity in this book. In particular, I found it really interesting to find how the lacuna, the operandi, the orison, and banjinxing worked. Which, from my understanding, the lacuna was this safety space that had been created by the psychic powers of the twins, so anything within that space would never age. And as long as they kept the lacuna and the operandi fed with psychovoltage, it would allow them to live forever. Then, from my understanding, we have the orison, which is like this live-action 3D set that's projected from the lacuna, and it allows the twins to manipulate it into whatever appearance they like so it can lure in more victims. And working in operation with the lacuna and the orison is the operandi, which this is really like a shield around them that protects them from any unwanted visitors that could cause them trouble or harm. Also, the bang jinxing aspect was a lot of fun because at first I really didn't know what they were talking about. Then eventually I discovered, oh, okay, well, this is something that they put in the food or drink of their victims, so it makes it easier for the twins to extract their victim's soul. So, yeah, all of that was really a lot to wrap my mind around, but I loved it. My final favorite moment was the ending. Now, at this point, Jonah had been injured because while he and Nora had been trying to extract Freya's soul, Sally's spirit stabbed him in the windpipe with a 6-inch hairpin. Which, even though this did injure Jonah, it also damaged the lacuna because Freya's spirit was able to escape. From there, we fast forward to 2015, where Nora lures a woman by the name of Dr. Iris into the lacuna. However, once it's too late, the twins discover that Dr. Iris is an immortal, but unlike them, she doesn't sacrifice humans so she can live forever. Instead, she's actually a part of a vigilante group who tries to protect people from those like Nora and Jonah. Then, after Jonah attacks Dr. Iris, she incinerates him with her powers. And due to Dr. Iris having left an explosive near the Iron Gate, when this goes off, it causes cracks to form in the lacuna where the world bleeds into that safety space. And upon Dr. Iris escaping, she leaves Nora behind, who then becomes this withered old hag. And even though Dr. Iris might have expected Nora to die, Nora actually is able to escape and possess an unborn baby, where she vows to one day exact her revenge on Dr. Iris. So, due to how Nora constantly worried that something would go wrong, I knew it was only going to be a matter of time before the twins met their match. However, I didn't know exactly what to expect on how this was going to play out. Also, I truly felt like Dr. Iris was really badass because not only could she incinerate her enemies with the flick of a wrist, it showed that she and her group had premeditated this moment ever since they took down the Saeed. Which, to me, I imagine the Saeed as being this powerful person not to be reckoned with. But once it mentioned that they had conquered him, I was like, yeah, the twins are totally screwed. And I really admired how the author kept Iris's scheming not only hid from the antagonist, but also from the reader. Like, when it was revealed that there was a vigilante group out against the twins and they had conquered the Saeed, that totally blew my mind, because even though I did expect for there to be a problem for the twins eventually, I did not expect for it to be at this level. I would like to take this opportunity to bitch about Nora and Jonah. For starters, I'll give them credit where credit is due, because they had nerves of steel. Which, I say this because had I been one of them and I had to spend eternity with the other, I would have lost my damn mind. Like, on one hand, we have where Jonah is this egotistical, cocky little skid mark of an asshole. Then, on the other hand, we have Nora, who, even though she's just a little bit better than her brother, she rides a high horse the whole damn time and acts like her shit don't stink. Y'all, I can't begin to describe how shit-tickled pink I was when Dr. Iris gave the twin twats their comeuppance. And for those of you who are paying attention, let this be a moral, because had the twins actually done what was right, they could have continued living without any problems whatsoever. But no, they had to be these greedy-ass little turds who had to have what they wanted when they wanted, and because of their greed, it bit them in the ass. Slade House by David Mitchell was a creepy experience that made me feel like I was roaming around a spooky old English village. And while the story remained original, it did remind me of what would happen if the stories of H.P. Lovecraft met the stories of Henry James. Aside from that, the protagonist and antagonist were a lot of fun, and I enjoyed learning about their backgrounds. And as far as themes are concerned, I noticed where this book focused on mortality, vulnerability, and the repercussions of greed. Also, in our buddy read, we noticed where this book had a lot of symbolism and foreshadowing. Character-wise, even though I noticed a cycle of rinse, wash, repeat with those who had entered Slade House, I was okay with that because their background stories were very diverse and they continued to hold my interest. But what really impressed me was how the decisions made by these people sparked a chain of events that continued on throughout the decades. Like, for example, the disappearances that happened in 79 and 88 influenced the paranormal group in 97 to investigate. And because of what happened to that group, it caused Freya to go to the Fox and Hound pub in 2006. Which, because of what happens to her, this leads to the conclusion in 2015. So, aside from all of the diversity that just made me keep turning the pages and wanting to learn more about these characters, my mind was blown on how the smallest of actions contributed to the grand finale. Also, I really love how even though Mr. Pink wasn't a main character or even a secondary character, his actions were still extremely vital to the story, because I tend to think that had it not been for him, some of the events in this book would not have been able to take place. So I really do appreciate how the author was able to give this level of importance to someone who had hidden so well in the background. As far as symbolism is concerned, first off, Hanny pointed out the 7 magpies in Chapter 1 and how in England magpies are associated with witchcraft. Then John brought to our attention the importance behind the iron door that led to Slade House, and he explained that it's historically known iron is used to repel, contain, or harm malevolent creatures or spirits. Also, since a garden and a ginkgo tree is mentioned in this story, John shared a few links that explain that gardens are seen to be an image of the soul and innocence, and they can symbolize the consciousness because of their enclosed characteristics, whereas the ginkgo tree represents longevity and strength. After that, Lisa and John brought to our attention how a jogger continued to reappear throughout this story. Then Hanny pointed out that every time he appeared, he was wearing black and orange, which this caused us to debate exactly what he represented or if he was foreshadowing. So, as we spoke, I found it odd that while this story took place near Halloween, the jogger was wearing colors that were affiliated with that holiday. So, after doing some research in regards to what those colors represent to the holiday, I found out that orange represents fall harvest and black represents death, which these are both extremely vital to the plot of this story, as it mainly focuses on harvesting souls and, of course, death. Theme-wise, Slade House focuses on being faced with our own mortality and what we would do if we had the option to live forever, which we see by the actions of Nora and Jonah that some people would totally rebel against natural law so they could obtain longevity. And to justify their motive, we have a character who explains death is life's only guarantee, and as human beings, we are hardwired to dread death. Then he explains that dread is a survival instinct, and humans created religion because they want to live forever. So, with that concept in mind, this does pose the question of what would you do if you could live forever? Would you go to these lengths that Nora and Jonah did, or would you just let life take its course? Next up, vulnerability is huge with this book, and in one way or another, it shows how everyone is defenseless to some degree. Like, aside from the victims that had been claimed by Slade House, even Nora and Jonah aren't 100% safe. Which, this is seen by how Nora constantly worries and the precautions they take so they can live securely at Slade House. And without giving away any spoilers, it does eventually show that the twins do have rivals. However, these rivals can even be hurt, which this brings us back to the subject of being faced with our own mortality. And last, we have the repercussions of greed, which unfortunately I can't go into details here due to spoilers, but I can say that greed is a huge part of this book, which this is primarily seen by how the twins are determined to live beyond their life expectancy, and because of what they do to obtain longevity, I saw them as being no different than vampires or parasites. Overall, Slade House had quite a few creepy and frightening moments, and as luck would have it, these moments always occurred when I was up by myself late at night, so I was totally able to indulge in the whole vibe of everything. Aside from that, there weren't really any gross out moments in this book. However, there was one body horror scene that really struck a nerve with me. Slade House by David Mitchell was a fun standalone read, and even though the book does reference other works by this author, you don't have to read those in order to enjoy this. And even though this book does breathe new life into the supernatural subgenre, it does blend other genres like fantasy and sci-fi. And even though this book is marketed as fantasy, there's enough chills and thrills in this work so it can fit perfectly into your horror library. So, at the end of the day, if you are looking for a fun and creepy read as the season gets cooler, I do highly recommend Slade House. Well, now that we're at the end of this episode, obviously my hair hasn't grown any like Carrie and Connie said it would, so I'm hoping that maybe in my next episode it will have grown a little bit. But with all of that covered, it's now time for me to thank these amazing people for contributing to my Patreon account. As you can tell, some of the names listed here are creators, so be sure to check out their work. And if you would like to contribute to my Patreon as well, I have a link available in the description section of this episode, where for $5 a month I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos, and if there's a certain profession you would like for me to tie to your name, just let me know and I'll include that as well. Also, I have a $10 tier available, where for $10 a month I'll still give you the shout out at the end of my videos, but I do creepy photography on the side, so at the beginning of every month, I'll send you over one of my creepy photos. From there, you can print it off, do whatever you like. So if you're able to do this, that's awesome. If not, no sweat. I just hope you return to this channel so we can have a good time together. Also, if you would like to hit me up on social media, links to my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are all available in the description section of this episode. And if you would like to spoil me, I do have a link to my Amazon wish list in there as well. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell, because I have more book reviews coming in the near future. So, until we see each other again, I hope everyone has a great week and sweet nightmares.